Jamboard is a collaborative whiteboard that can be edited by multiple people at the same time. You invite people to edit the Jamboard either by email or by sending them a link to the Jamboard. Their edits are automatically saved to the cloud when they complete their work. Now, before I go into detail on how to use Jamboard, I wanted to show you some examples of how you can use it in your tutoring to help whet your appetite and make you interested in learning more. The first example is to upload an image into the Jamboard and then ask your learner to write about what they see in the image. Another example is to use images to inspire a language experience story written by the learner. That's what we did in this case, and then we looked and noticed that the verb tenses needed some practice, so we did an impromptu exercise on present and past tense verbs after the language experience story. Here I did a quick mind map using sticky notes and showed the learner how easy it was to move the sticky notes around to get all the pieces of my story in the right order before I started writing. This is probably my favorite use of the Jamboard, writing a dialogue journal. So I and my learner can both write on the same Jamboard, a dialogue journal, and then it's preserved for both of us to see the progress later. Here's a case where I spelled out someone's name with sticky notes and had the learners turn each letter into the line of a poem. I like to use Quizlet for vocabulary practice, but it doesn't have an option for the learner to write their own sentences using the vocabulary words. So here I pulled out some of the vocabulary words we'd been working with and had the learner write sentences using those words. Here we took the first draft of a story that was actually taken out of a dialogue journal with just the learner's responses, and then had the learner edit that draft in a separate frame to fix any errors that they saw and add any embellishment that they wanted to the story. And now we have in one Jamboard both the first draft and the next draft saved so we can see the progress. Here's a case where I was working with a small group and we're each working individually on selecting quotes from a story and what that quote means to us. And each learner could have a separate frame of the same Jamboard and work independently, and then we reviewed it all together when everyone was finished. Okay, so this is Jamboard. I'm in my Chrome browser because that's the browser that I usually use. And I've pulled up a new jam and it's untitled. So first I want to title it. So usually I would title it with a date and maybe the learner's name. So that would be my title. And then there are a number of tools to write on a Jamboard. So for example, there's a pen and you can write, I can write my name. Oops, I ran out of room on my trackpad. Okay, so I can erase it. That didn't come out very well. So let's just stop it there. I have sticky notes, and you can change the colors of your sticky notes. Sticky notes are always square, and they always save to the same place, so you have to move them around if you want them somewhere different. I could import an image, upload it, or do an image search, or browse and drag a file there, etc. Many ways to put an image on the page. I could draw circles, which might be in other shapes, which I just discovered now. All right, and that might be really helpful for things like mind mapping, right? Want to draw a bunch of circles and connect them to each other, so forth. The thing that I use the most is the text box. I use sticky notes a bunch to get people started. People really respond to the sticky notes. And then I use a text box. And you can resize the text box. And this is a text box. And you can change the color of the text box. You can change the size of the text in the text box. You can make the text box longer if you're typing out a story, for example, or otherwise it'll put in its own returns. It will start a new line automatically. But if you didn't want it to do that, afterwards you can go in and change the size of the text box. All right, so the next thing you have is frames. So I can add a new frame. Boom, there's a new frame. Okay, let me make another text box and say this is the second frame. And maybe I want somebody else to write on this frame. I can invite people with this share. So I can either get a link. So that's really handy to use in Zoom. You can just send a link to everybody and they can get in and write with it. And you want to make sure that you let them edit. So anyone with this link can be an editor, not just a viewer, right? Or you can add email addresses here. That's what I prefer to do because then they get sent an email invite, but then they can always get back to that Jamboard. And especially if they're a Gmail user, they'll have a library of Jamboards saved under their profile. So that's the basics. With the frames, you can expand the frame bar and you can see this is one frame, this is another frame. And you can duplicate or delete the frames. So that's really handy. And you've named it. So now it's in your Jam library. So I have all these Jamboards in my Jam library, which I've shown you a bunch of already. And I hit this giant plus sign to start a new Jam. And if I'm a Google, like a Gmail user, or if I just go into jamboard.google.com, as you see in my URL board here, I'll see my list of Jamboards. And also I can get to it, so if I'm in a Google app already, I can find Jamboard in my list of apps. It's quite a ways down, as you can see. And I can get to Jamboard from there as well. Example to show when somebody else is collaborating on the same Jamboard frame that you are. I have another user I've shared this with, and they're going to edit this text box. It says here is another text box. And now I can see their little avatar showing that they're in there and they're editing the text box. But I don't know what they're editing because they're still in process and it doesn't save until they move their cursor out of the text box. So now they're going to move their cursor out, and now I see it highlights briefly that it's changed, and I see that they added here is yet another text box. So that's why if you're working with a learner and they're editing their previous work, have them share their Jamboard session in Zoom so you can see what they're doing, because otherwise they'll be in the middle of editing and they'll be asking you questions and you won't know where they are and what exactly they're referring to. So it'll be a pain unless you can see exactly what they're doing. And also make sure at the end of the session everybody is out of their text boxes or their sticky notes or whatever they're doing, because otherwise it won't get saved. And I have had like a learner write a whole paragraph and not get out of it, and then we went back the next time and it was gone. Or they're editing a paragraph and we went back next time and their edits were all gone. And even though there is like an undo and a redo, I cannot undo somebody else's edit. So I can only undo my own. So I can't get it back for them.